Welcome to Unit 3, What Media Is and What Media Does. An avatar can look and sound like any presentational aesthetic that the designer wants them to have. They can be young or old, conservative or not. The real question is, are there ethics involved in how we employ avatars? To what purpose and with what design or intentionality? In relation to our audiences? The answer is yes. Of course there are ethics involved, and yes, none of us has all of the answers, yet. This technology and the opportunities it offers are too new. Right now, we are all participant to a new form of media praxis. By working together, though, we can decide as a community what best practices means in the age of AI and generative media. Hello again, Avatar Violetta here to welcome you to Unit 3. In Unit 1, the course content discussed very briefly about the difference between what media is and what media does. In Unit 2, students learned about how to work with generating images in Firefly and avatar direction in HeyGen. In Unit 3, students will experiment with recording themselves using Zoom in order to better understand how media production choices influence audience perception. We also consider more deeply 3 types of media: primary footage, stock footage, and generative media, as they are used in 3 different possible ways. That is, as documentary evidence, illustrative media, or sadly, as what we term TOSH media. Please remember to consult the vocabulary list in Unit 1 if you have forgotten any of the definitions for these terms, and also be sure to read all of the unit content. Again, the goal of this unit and course is to learn not only what media is, but also about what media does. Media does not simply communicate information. It also shapes attention, emotion, interpretation, credibility, memory, and audience perception. This unit invites students to consider: what feels authentic? What feels constructed? Does performance increase credibility? Can mediated communication ever be entirely neutral? By the end of this unit, students should have a stronger understanding of how digital presence operates in modern media environments, and how even simple production choices communicate meaning.
These challenging questions about when and how to incorporate generative media into the everyday will be something we look at more closely in future units of this course. For now, please focus upon acquisition of skills. Dr. Kirsten James Dunn. This is Dr. Kirsten James Dunn in the recorded flesh, so to speak. So before we completely close this segment, I thought it might be useful to briefly step out from behind the avatar and say hello as well as myself, the person behind the interface. Or perhaps more accurately, one of the sources behind the interface, because new forms of media raise an interesting question. What exactly makes something real, or perhaps more accurately, feel real? In some ways, this recording you are watching, even though it comes from a living, breathing Dr. Kirsten James Dunn, is also like the avatars are, a constructed composite form of media. It is framed, recorded, edited, compressed, filtered, uploaded, and viewed later in time from the original recording. You are not seeing this as I'm recording this. You're going to watch this on your own or with others later on, quite separately from when I originally was in the moment alive recording this. The avatars you've been watching are also not a live physical version of me. They are based upon my voice, my choices, my teaching style, my timing, my priorities, and my ideas. Everything they are saying has been written and selected by me. In other words, I am sharing my mind with you through a particular medium. And perhaps this is a good moment to actually talk about the idea of medium. Avatars, books, film, videos, pre-recorded videos, these are all forms of media. And if we look at what media is, and we also look at what it does, we see that its purpose quite often is to preserve moments in reality, in time, that would otherwise pass by very quickly. So perhaps the difference between avatar use and direct recording is not always between real and fake, between different types of presence. Let me try a more narrative form of explaining this concept. When I was a child, I found a copy of The Prophet by Khalil Gibran on my father's bookshelf. I think I was 7 or 8 years old. Reading it felt less like reading a book and more like reading, or meeting rather, with another person. I was surprised and somewhat devastated to learn that he had been dead for many years. I remember thinking, what could that be? He seemed so alive through the words he had written. Recorded media does this. Books, photographs, film, television, audio, and now digital media can create a sense of presence across distance, and sometimes even vast amounts of time. So, what are we learning about media? Well, media informs, it persuades, it entertains, but media can also create the feeling that another person is somehow in the room with us, even when they are far away or long gone. So perhaps one of the most useful questions we can ask in media studies is not simply what is real, but also how does this create the feeling of reality? And what does that mediated sense of reality do? When we venture into new media, particularly in the form of avatars for teaching and learning, we may struggle with what is termed the uncanny valley experience. It is difficult to put into words, but generally it is the sense that something isn't alive, though it appears so. And oddly enough, it seems that part of why we as human beings experience this with AI and with generative avatars is not because they fall short of perfection, but because they are too perfect. Sometimes imperfections, pauses, these reveal the true embodiment of the speaker and help audiences feel more connected to the speaker. The idea that there is a real human being out there that one could relate to. However, there's also something to be said for clarity and careful delivery of ideas, and this is where avatars can help considerably, communicating ideas swiftly and effectively. In short, simply having information readily available may be worth a little technological awkwardness along the way. All of these things matter, but perhaps most importantly when dealing with media, particularly this new media, is to ask not only what is this, but how is this? Because understanding who is standing behind that production curtain and what their purpose is, and who they think you, as the audience, is, all of that matters critically. As we continue through this course, I again encourage you to pay attention not only to what media is, but to what media does. So, as I've said before, pay attention to how media shapes attention, credibility, emotion, memory, and human connection. Thank you for watching this pre-recorded video, and I will see you again in Unit 4.